Hi, everybody. My name is Oren. I'm here with colleague Michael Hollander, who you will hear from in a little bit. And we're excited to be talking to you about building a research and policy lab in a prosecutor's office. If you would have asked me in 2018 if we would ever be presenting at a legal epidemiology conference, I would not have thought so. But here we are, and I hope you'll find this very interesting. So there's a new opportunity in the prosecution space to use data, research, and science to inform day-to-day decision-making, and that is where we find ourselves and what we'll be talking to you about today. First, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. What is it? It's the largest prosecutor's office in Pennsylvania. When police make an arrest, they bring it to us, and we decide whether or not to charge the case. There's a new district attorney in Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, and he is progressive, as they say, and you'll probably be hearing from him during this conference or from the upcoming LEPH conference. The Data Lab, the District Attorney's Transparency Analytics Lab, we're a group with researchers, data analysts, and project managers. We collaborate with people in our office. We collaborate with stakeholders across the city, external academic researchers, etc. We're involved in policy planning, implementation, and evaluation. If data is not involved in your plan, it becomes much more difficult to implement and certainly to evaluate. So please use data from the jump. This is our mission statement. We're very interested, especially in this moment, in lifting up an anti-racist, anti-sexist agenda so that we can make the system more transparent, accountable, and less racist. What we'll be talking to you today is a case study. So we supported research in 2018 that we would do completely differently today if given the opportunity. And we're going to talk to you about how we did it in 2018, and then Mike will talk to you about how he would approach it today. So really the change has been the development of some data infrastructure. This is the 2018 study as carried out by Ruth Scheffner, Jason Sloan, and colleagues. They had a list of 900 people who unfortunately accidentally overdosed in Philadelphia in 2016. They had some identifiable information, and they took that information and they came to our office and linked it manually, one by one, with our case management system. So this involved somebody sitting at a computer, entering a single identifier, finding the person they were looking for, and then taking a lot of information from the computer screen and creating a database. This took a lot of time, hundreds and hundreds of hours. You can see at the bottom, to complete those steps required hundreds of hours, and this was done by two people. One was a very trained student who was both in law school and working on a master's degree. And the point is that this takes a lot of resources, both in terms of the expertise of the person who is looking at the data and just the time it takes to get all this data together. Of course, when you spend lots of time, you have the benefit of this kind of study. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, but feel free to pause this presentation and look more closely. Essentially, what they found is that lots of people who overdosed in 2016 in Philadelphia had previous criminal legal system contacts. Very few of them had been through some of our diversion systems, programs, including treatment court. Some in particular, at the top of the bar graph here, you can see that some had 50 or more interactions. And indeed, in the 2 years before their death, they came into contact many times with the criminal legal system. And these are framed as opportunities for some kind of intervention that would have led to something other than this overdose. I'm now handing it over to Mike to talk about data development.
Yeah, so thank you, Oren. The big difference between then and today is that we've spent the last 2+ years developing both our data and our research protocols within our office. And both of these have allowed us to accelerate this process of going from an idea and collaboration with a researcher to actually working on the actual project. Something happened to the slides, there we go. The first thing that we did is we worked on creating researchable data. So rather than requiring a law student to sit at a computer, pull up every single case, type up the information into a separate database, and then cross-check it to make sure everything's correct, we have access to all of this data within our office. We have lots of databases, a court database, a police database, an internal case management database that's somewhat limited, and then other data that we're getting from different places. And what we did is we spent time linking that data together So we can go from arrest all the way through case disposition, and we can look at an individual's arrest and case history over the course of a period of more than a decade. We then explored the data that we put together. And when we explored it, we were looking for different things. We looked to see how accurate certain pieces of data were. So some of the data is collected only infrequently, and so we don't necessarily want to use that data. But we also want to understand what was in this data and how that data connects to real world processes. So if somebody goes to court and they enter a diversion program, what does that look like in our data and how can we describe it? We then clean the data. A lot of times the data comes in formats that are maybe hard to use for research. So as an example, you might be interested in knowing whether a case has certain types of charges were brought in a case. Was the case a violent case? Was the case a drug case? Was a gun involved in the case, and so on? And we can now create variables that are associated with each of those things. And then we can also do things like take the 400 some odd dispositions that an individual case can have and boil it down into 6 or 7 categories that are easier to use for research. And then finally, we automated this process. So every single day, we have a process runs that links all of the data we have, cleans it, and then puts it into a place and a format that is easily used by us, and then ultimately when we share it with researchers. The second thing we did is we made this data shareable. And we made it shareable in 2 different ways. One is we created a data dictionary, which was the fruit of this exploration and cleaning. And that really just describes every field in the data, what the limits of that data are, how that data connects to the real world, and what researchers should expect when they're using that data. But we also created de-identification tools, right? So we want to be able to share data, but to do it privately. And so this allows us to very quickly and easily de-identify data and even test how well we've de-identified that data before we share it. And then finally, a thing that was very important is we had to gain expertise in data and privacy laws in Pennsylvania and around the country, or nationally, so that we knew what we're allowed to share and what we're not allowed to share. And one of the advantages of that is not only are we not violating the law and we're making sure that we're upholding our moral obligation to not share private information, but we're also able to come up with creative solutions to problems that we might not have been able to work out before. And in a situation where previously we might not have been able to share data, now we can sometimes come up with a creative solution to do so. Next slide, Oren. So if we were redoing the 2018 study, that was an excellent study in 2021, and we're actually aiming to do this, how would we do it and how would that be different? Well, the first thing is we're working with the medical examiner's office now to get a constant feed of data as to who is fatally overdosing in Philadelphia. And we should be able to use that data to then digitally link to the data that we already have on police and court records. So what we can do now is continuously and automatically take fatal overdose data and connect it to criminal record data, and we can see if, for example, there's changes in time. For example, did the people in 2016 who were part of the study have different types and quantities of connections with the criminal justice system as compared to people in 2018 or 2019? And I took like 2 or 3 minutes to write some code that is not completely real because we don't have this medical examiner's data yet, but this is essentially the 8 lines of data, or 8 lines of code, excuse me, that would almost completely obviate the hundreds of hours of work of the excellent law student who is at our office looking up people's records. So the idea is that we can go from an idea with a researcher to a continuous and automatically updated version of a research project in an extremely fast period of time as compared to earlier. Next slide. So I'm not going to belabor this slide. Please pause the presentation. But the idea on this slide is just to make sure that everyone understands that this is not the only project that we are and have worked on that involves the nexus of public safety and public health. This is something that's near and dear to us, and that we're continuing to both engage in on these projects and continue to find new projects to engage in to help improve both public safety and public health in Philadelphia. And finally, all of this has come with, next slide, Oren. All of this has come with both challenges and opportunities. And some of these things are both challenges and opportunities. And so I want to just flag that many of these things are not one or the other. So we lack a case management system, or at least a robust case management system. We do have one. And that's a challenge because it means that we don't have a lot of data, in particular on how the decisions and actions by people within our office have a long-term effect on public health outcomes. We might know that an actor was involved in the system, and we might know what the case outcome was, but we actually can't learn how our behavior in the district attorney's office affects those long-term outcomes. But the opportunity there is that we are now making a case management system, and we're making it with research in mind, and we're thinking about how exactly to build that system to best support our research. We're also, we're really trying hard to make this data-driven systemic change, but we also really want to be careful about protecting individual privacy. And as we expand our data libraries, we de-silo data and get data from different parts of the city, from the Census Bureau, from other places, and we start connecting it together. It's both an opportunity for us to grow the types of research projects we can work on, but we also have to be extremely careful that we're not somehow losing that protection of individual privacy, and making sure that this research is being done with broad public health in mind, but also broad public protection of privacy. We are working as hard as we can to take the research that we do with our partners and automate it internally. So instead of having research at a single point in time, like the study that we talked about earlier, we can continuously and automatically update that and continue to learn and change our policies based on how the system's changing on the ground. And all of this is just leading into an evolution of what's possible. And so we're excited to work with the people that are watching this presentation, researchers around the country and around the world, to continue to think about how public safety and public health connect, and accelerate those projects forward within this office, and also share those findings outside of this office. And we'd be remiss if we didn't close by acknowledging all of the people that work in the data lab, including our interns this semester. We also have the Missed Opportunity Study team, which is the team that Oren mentioned earlier. And then we have a very tight connection with Penn, and we've listed our Penn partners as well. So we thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk today. And we hope that you'll go to our website that showcases a lot of the data that we're working on regularly. It will very soon also showcase all of the research projects that we're working on. Thank you very much.